What if Tywin Lannister became king, not Robert Baratheon? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. As the corpses of Rhaegar's children are brought out, Tywin inspects the expressions of the gathered lords. Disgust and horror are clear among many of them. Ned, Jon Arryn, and their bannermen do not bother to hide their expressions. Robert is a bit more subdued. There is a clear disapproval, but there is also a hint of relief in his eyes, perhaps because he did not have to do the deed himself. Tywin finds himself mirroring the Baratheon lord for once. Though he might have ordered it, things ended up messier than he would have liked. He levels a sharp look on Gregor and Amory for this. For now, he stands in silence until Robert finds his voice.
What exactly do you intend to prove with this display here, Lord Tywin?
Isn't it obvious? My commitment to your cause, Lord Robert. These two were the heirs to the Iron Throne, the last obstacle in the city, and I have removed them for you. You call this butchery loyalty? If you truly cared for our cause, where were your spears and swords when we bled in the Trident, where Lord Robert nearly lost his life? Where were you during the Battle of the Bells, where Robert relied on the loyalty of the small folk to save him? Where were you at the Ashford, when Randall Tarley cut apart Robert's vanguard? Instead you come here to butcher defenseless women and babes. This is not loyalty. This is treason. Oh, hold your tongue, Lord Stark. Your dear friend was a usurper in name and action. But with this I give him legitimacy to his claim. Assurances that no one will challenge his rule moving forward.
And do you expect me to thank you for this action?
I expect no such thing. I only request that you remember my contribution when you sit on the Iron Throne.
Don't worry. I don't think I'll soon forget this.
If that is true, then I expect you to take action for this barbarity. Start with Lord Tywin. Send him to the wall, or take his head. Let all the men know you condemned such an act. Do you think any lord was obligated to support him? What did you think would have been done to secure your victory? Were you planning on spanking them and making them promise to not claim their birthright? So long as one of the Targaryens live, there will always be a challenge to your rule. They were children. They were a threat. Whether they liked it or not, they would have always been a figurehead for rebellion, and would have caused problems despite what you may think.
Enough of this. Lord Tywin, clearly you do not understand the purpose of my rebellion. I did it to stop cruelty and abuse like this. Still, what is done cannot be undone. If you want your reward, there, you have it.
He gestures to the Iron Throne as he shakes his head. It takes everyone a moment to understand what is going on. Tywin is the first, and Ned Stark a moment later.
You created this mess. You can live with it.
Robert, you cannot possibly mean...
I do. But do you expect me to sit on a throne built on the blood of babes? If that's what's required to rule, then I shall have none of it. I'm not made to rule. Unless any of you would rather claim that damn chair.
He glances around sharply at Ned, Jon Arryn, and the others. Yet none of them dare move. Tywin takes a moment to let the silence linger, then nods. Slowly he begins to make his way over to the Iron Throne, and eases himself down onto it. The moment feels natural, and once he is there, he has a commanding view of the others. The first thing he commands is for them to pay homage. Though they are frozen in place for a moment, one by one the great lords of the Seven Kingdoms kneel to him. The last of them is Ned Stark, whose gaze never leaves him. Word spreads quickly of the change in leadership, and many of the remaining houses, royalist or otherwise, waste no time in bending the knee to Tywin, who crowns himself king of the Seven Kingdoms. His first order of business is to remove Jaime as a member of the Kingsguard. He prefers to have him as his heir so he can marry him off. The next course of action is dealing with the remaining Targaryens. Though Viserys and Daenerys escaped to Essos, he offers a bounty on their heads, and soon assassins stalk the children wherever they go. Eventually, one lucky assassin kills the two and presents their heads to the old lion, who rewards them accordingly. As with the deaths of Rhaegar's children, this is met with horror and disgust, but none dare speak of it openly. Tywin's reputation precedes him, as he is infamous for his treatment of rebels, such as Rhaenys and Tarbex, and this convinces many to accept his rule without a fight. Even those less than pleased, like Ned and Jon Arryn, do not publicly oppose him, simply returning to their seats to live in peace. That is not to say that all houses accept him. The new king rules through fear, sending threats and warnings to those who oppose him. While this prevents open rebellion, it doesn't foster genuine loyalty. Tywin realizes he must strengthen his position as much as possible. Cersei and Jaime are his two best keys. The North and Vale will not come to him, no matter how enticing the marriage alliance can be. And Robert is unpredictable. Though he's not hostile, his friendship with Ned can prevent him from cultivating an alliance. Dorne is hostile due to the death of Elia Martell and her children. This only leaves the Riverlands and the Reach as potential allies. It is decided that Jaime shall wed Margaery Tyrell and Cersei Edmund Tully to gain their allegiance. Neither of the Lannister twins is pleased with this marriage and resents their spouses, but it is enough to get them support from these regions, and just in time too, as while most houses wisely choose to stay quiet, Balon Greyjoy is anything but. He sees how most regions feel little loyalty to the Lannister dynasty and tries to rebel. The Ironborn's first attack is the Lannisport fleet, which is ambushed and sunk by anchor. For Tywin, this is a huge embarrassment, and his flagship goes up in flames. To add insult to injury, the Ironborn begin to raid the territories of him and his allies. But this success is short-lived, as whatever distrust the people of Westeros might have to Tywin Lannister, they despise the Ironborn even more, and most houses commit troops to help deal with this rebellion. The exception to this is Ned Stark and Dorne. The Dornish withhold their army and ships entirely, focusing only on defending their lands, while Ned Stark sends troops out of duty, but he does so under his own command instead of placing them under the coalition army. While not treasonous, it is an insult and a challenge, with Ned Stark essentially saying he does not recognize Tywin's authority. So while the coalition invades Old Wyck and Pike, Ned and his Northmen strike at the smaller islands and capture them. The rebellion is over before it does much damage, and does help solidify Tywin's grip on power as a steady hand. With Balon Greyjoy dead, Tywin has him executed and instead places his son, Theon, as the new ruler of House Greyjoy. Though young, Theon makes for an ideal puppet. He leaves the day-to-day operations of the Iron Islands to one of his uncles, while Theon is taken to the capital to be raised by Tywin. However, he does not forget the North's insolence and decides to hit back through the Night's Watch. Although this order is theoretically in charge of the protection of the Seven Kingdoms, in truth, it is the North most affected by it. So Tywin decides to reduce the number of recruits allowed to join the order by limiting the recruitment opportunities of wandering crows. Soon, the number of Night's Watch begin to decline, while wildling raids increase. This forces the North to commit more forces to defending the Wall. Although Tywin hopes it will turn them against Ned, it only further alienates the North, who can smell Tywin's disdain for them behind this scheme. This does lead to increased wildling raids as the Night's Watch numbers dwindle and they cross in greater numbers. Most return, but some become raiders in the mountains, and wolf's food, adding to the chaos. Though a few seem more interested in settling beyond the Wall. They say they want land, and in exchange they will help defend against future raids. Although reluctant to trust them, Ned consents, as the Night's Watch no longer has the numbers to handle things on their own. These settled raiders whisper of dark things beyond the Wall, but are dismissed as simple folklore stories. And yet this is only the start of his troubles. Though he thinks the Targaryens are gone, in truth, Varys sneaks out the youngest of Rhaegar's family, Aegon VI, and raises him in secret alongside other exiles from Robert's rebellion. Their opinions have only hardened with Tywin on the throne, and they see him as little more than a tyrant, a sentiment shared by their counterparts in the Seven Kingdoms. Aegon VI is raised in secrecy, being taught his family history, the way of the Seven Kingdoms, and how to fight until such a time that they can invade. That blow comes not at Westeros itself, but at the stepstones, which make an ideal springboard. The Golden Company landed there and began rooting out the pirates nested there. At first, Tywin thinks little of this, as it could be one of the free cities simply trying to claim their islands again. But then the strangest thing happens. Dorne also begins sending ships and men to fight. The battles are brutal, but a war on two fronts with both the East and West working in tandem is too much for the pirates, and amidst their bloodshed, Aegon VI has a secret marriage ceremony with his new wife, Arianna Martell, uniting the Martells and Targaryens once again. But as the war comes to an end, these same Dornish ships return to him, bearing with them the Golden Company, who launch a surprise invasion into the Stormlands while the Dornish attack the Reach. The news takes the realm by surprise as they make impressive headway, seizing several border castles and blockading others. The Reach initially try to launch a naval raid and relieve these castles, but their first encounter with the Dornish is disastrous. Dornish fire ships, smaller but faster, streak through the waves, their crews throwing torches and pots of burning pitch onto the Red One galleys. Flames erupt in thick black clouds, sending men screaming into the sea. Cursing Mace's incompetence, Tywin personally gathers the royal fleet and sails southward, launching a direct invasion not towards Dorne, but to Bloodstone. He sends word to Randall Tarley and the Stormlands to begin organizing their defenses and grind down the invasion force. On the shores of Bloodstone, Lannister troops wade through knee-high surf, shields raised as arrows rain down from the cliffs above. The Golden Company holds firm, their discipline unbroken, their phalanx gleaming in the sunlight. When the first clash comes, it is a thunderous collision of steel on steel, men screaming, horses buckling, blood splashing onto the pale sands. Gregor Clegane fights at the front, his sword hacking through the gilded armor of the Golden Company captain. The sellsword falls, but another takes its place. The mercenaries fight like men with something to prove, their loyalty to gold tempered by a surprising sense of duty. A few Reachmen who join the invasion force also rush through from the western flank. They fight hard and manage to rejoin the Lannister army, but as the Golden Company retreats, Dornish skirmishers appear from the ridges and caves, raining spears down at them and breaking their advance. Though they surrender the beachhead, the Lannisters dare not advance further. On Grey Gallows, fighting is even more intense. They initially push inland, though cautiously, as they fear whether or not the Dornish may launch an ambush. From a hill overlooking the battle, Aegon VI watches astride a black destrier, Blackfire resting in his grip. Beside him, Jon Connington grips the hilt of his blade, his knuckles white. He turns to the young king.
Now's the time. Lead them.
Aegon does not hesitate. He raises Blackfire high and orders a charge. Nearly 500 knights with twice as many light cavalry and free riders come rushing forward, the cry of Aegon upon their lips as they crash into the Lannister forces. The lions are forced to yield ground, their golden banners trampled underfoot. This continues across all of the islands, which turn into a grinding war of attrition, with them having to fight for every bit of territory they capture from the Targaryens. It is a slow process, but they begin to gain ground, and Tywin can breathe. That is, until one day he receives a report from the mainland. The exhausted rider breathlessly recounts everything that just happened. Ned Stark crossed the neck with a small army and declared for Aegon VI. The North has seen the neglect of their homeland under Tywin, and Ned reminds them they fought under Robert while Tywin did nothing. They owe him no loyalty, and soon the Starks are joined by houses Manderly, Karstark, Umber, Carwyn, and Mormont. As the armies of the North gather at Moat Cailin, ravens fly to old allies in the Vale and the Riverlands. Tywin initially hopes that Lord Hoster Tully will stop them, but the cunning old lord recalls the destruction wrought on the Riverlands in the last war. Then he thinks of his daughter Catelyn, who still remains in the North. At last, he issues his decree. Though he reaffirms his loyalty to King Tywin, the Riverlands will not fight the Northmen. He will send men to help Tywin fight in the Stepstones as a gesture of goodwill. In the Stormlands, Robert mirrors Hoster Tully's sentiments. He announces he will gladly fight the Targaryen threat, but will not raise his hammer against the Northmen. However, not all houses have the same sentiments as House Tully. Walder Frey also has blood ties to House Lannister, and locks the Northmen out from his keep, preventing them from crossing. Tywin sends Sir Kevan with an army of levies from the Crownlands to reinforce House Frey. However, they aren't the only ones who see the war in the Riverlands brewing. Jon Arryn calls his banners, and the Knights of the Vale ride forth, their banners flying high when they march into the Riverlands. They soon begin clashing with the Lannister army that encamps in the Riverlands, but sends men forward to levy new troops or punish those of flagging loyalty. Skirmishes break out all across the Riverlands despite Hoster Tully's best efforts. Jon Arryn and Sir Kevan fight each other to a standstill, with neither side being able to best the other, but instead focusing on flipping villages and towns across the area. Here, Jon Arryn finds surprising allies. Many of the old Targaryen loyalists rise to meet them. The Derrys, Motons, Goodbrooks, Rhaegars, and Leicesters all rise in support of them. With this army, they can fight their way to the Twins, surrounding it on both sides and forcing House Frey into submission. Those who don't sneak into the Lannister camps. They murder Lannister men as they sleep, launching raids and harass their support lines. The largest battle takes place around Harrenhal, where Kevan gathers his forces and shifts focus. Rather than relieving the Twins, he instead tries to open the land route. The Westermen, Crownlanders, and Royalist Riverlanders instead march west toward the Riverlands, but the rebel army under Ned Stark meets them. At Harrenhal, his army meets the rebel host. Ned Stark stands firm at the center, his bannermen at his flanks. Great John Umber, Roose Bolton, and Raymond Derry among them. The Riverlands are split, but many lords have thrown their weight behind Ned, unwilling to serve under Lannister rule. The Vale's forces, led by Jon Arryn's commanders, reinforce the rebel flank. The battle begins with a thunderous charge. Lannister cavalry rushes into northern spearmen. It is a bloody battle, but the front holds. The chaos rages along the broken ruins of Harrenhal's shadow, blood soaking into the earth. Kevan tries to push through, seeking to break the Vale Knights before they can fully engage. He has Adam Marbrand launching a daring charge, hitting them hard and challenging their dominance in the field. Jan Royce keeps them in order, holding them back just as Roose Bolton sees the hard fighting and detaches a small force to reinforce them. They move through the marshes and hit them in a pincer attack. Westermen falter, and as they attempt to regroup, Edmure Tully leads the charge down the left behind the four of Longbowmen as he hits the rebel Riverlanders. The field becomes a slaughterhouse as they battle amidst the ruins, with fallen structures becoming a prize that trades back and forth. Seeing the battle turn into a chaotic mess, Kevan Lannister barely manages to retreat with his remaining men, escaping westward in disarray. The rebels hold the field. Harrenhal and the Riverlands with it now belong to Ned Stark. In the Stormlands, Robert Baratheon clashes with the rebel forces. Storm's End remains under Robert's control, but much of the south has turned against him as Jon Connington recaptures Griffin's Roost and recaptures several major castles. However, Robert rages a lightning campaign, chasing the Griffin's tail. Battles rage across the Reach as well, where the Tyrells remain loyal to Tywin, fending off the Dornish and Aegon VI's Golden Company. But far to the north, a great threat stirs. Under Tywin's orders, Theon Greyjoy sails with Ironborn raiders, striking deep into northern lands. Towns and villages burn, their people slaughtered or taken as thralls. Theon, eager to prove himself, sets his sights on Deepwood Motte and Barrowtown, knowing that every piece of land he takes is his to keep. But as he moves deeper into the north, Robb Stark and Jon Snow ride out and gather whatever Northmen he can find to meet them. This leaves Catelyn in Winterfell when ravens bring news more terrifying than any rider. The Wall is under siege. With the Night's Watch reduced to barely a few hundred men, most of them criminals and forced conscripts, the ancient magic of the Wall begins to wane as their purpose is gone. The White Walkers, long a myth to the south, come in force. Jorah Mormont leads his men bravely, fighting alongside the wildlings in the Wall. They use its crumbling defenses to maximum effect and hold it for several weeks. But while their numbers are limited, the dead are innumerable. They do not tire. The Night's Watch is overwhelmed, its defenders slaughtered. As the Wall cracks and crumbles in places, the others pour southward, their icy blades cutting down anything in their path. The fall of the Wall spreads quickly across the Seven Kingdoms, reaching Ned's and Robb's ears. At first, they try to resist, with different houses trying to fight them off. But this is a grave mistake, as no matter how many whites they slay, they are helpless to the Night King's endless horde. Instead, they realize with growing dread that this is not a war they can win on their own. Ned Stark rides hard through the smoking ruins of the north, leading his army back to reinforce the Wall. When he reaches back, his heart is heavy with the weight of despair. Villages lie in smoldering ruin, their inhabitants either dead or worse, taken by the White Walkers to swell their ranks. The cold grips everything, a creeping death spreading from the shattered wall. His bannermen ride behind him in silence, their faces pale with fear. Alongside them, a handful of rivermen and valemen volunteered to join them, but now they find themselves amid a war unlike any other. Winterfell still stands, but only just. Already the castle is surrounded by the dead, though their numbers are spread out as the Whites attack whatever village they can find. Ned orders a desperate charge into this mess, his horsemen galloping behind them as they crash into the thinned undead. What they have in numbers, they lack in discipline, and the Whites initially crumble under the onslaught. Ned himself fights like a man possessed, hacking through the undead. But while this success is impressive, it is fleeting. The Whites soon begin to swarm them, rushing forward without fear of being cut down or crushed. Soon the cavalry struggle to move, and men begin to get dragged down. Behind them, the infantry struggles to keep this gap open. Around him, Ned watches as warriors fall, but somehow he manages to make his way inside. Fires burn in the Great Hall as survivors huddle together, shivering against the deathly chill that seeps through the stone walls. Catelyn tells him everything that happened, all the reports of the dead, all the fallen houses and ruined villages. Despite everything they've done, nothing is stopping them. With no other choice, Ned orders an evacuation. The northern forces, what remains of them, gather the people and march south. They ride through every village, ordering everyone to abandon their homes and go with them. White Harbor becomes their final hope, as its bustling port ferries people out day and night. But it is not enough, as there are only so many ships. As they move, they send riders ahead to warn the river lords in the Vale of what is coming. Some believe him immediately, others hesitate, but all understand that this is no ordinary war. Edmure Tully, despite his allegiance to the royalist cause, refuses to stand idle while his people perish. He oversees the evacuation of thousands of small folk, leading them eastward to the Vale, where they are granted refuge behind the Bloody Gate. This decision shatters the resistance in the Riverlands, as lords once loyal to Tywin realize their homes will soon be little more than graveyards. It allows Kevin to retake much of the territory without a fight, including the twins. He hears about this and plans on marching north to reinforce Ned Stark, but when he gives his report to his brother, he is shocked by the answer. Tywin, ever pragmatic, refuses to gamble his forces against an unstoppable foe with anything less than full strength. He abandons the north entirely, commanding Kevin to hold Moat Cailin and retake the twins, securing all passage southward. The north is lost, and he will not waste his armies in a doomed effort. Instead, he is to buy time for them so he can sail back and replenish their army. At White Harbor, the situation grows dire. Ships are filled to the brim with desolate souls fleeing south, but there are too many, and not enough vessels. In the west, Theon Greyjoy exploits the chaos, rounding up survivors to take as thralls back to the Iron Island. His raiders move quickly, seizing ships and gathering captives under the guise of aid along the Stony Shore. Robb Stark, seeing the treachery, tries to make a move and open up another place to evacuate. Taking his small host, he intercepts Theon in the middle of another raid, knowing his men don't have the means to challenge them on land. The Ironborn retreats. In their hurry, they row right into Lady Mormont's trap, where she uses a fleet of fishing skiffs and rushes at the panicked Ironborn, boarding their ships and blocking them off, so the Northmen on shore can sail up and capture them. With these stolen vessels, more of the North's people are ferried away from the coming darkness. With the North's population rapidly depleting, most of the Northmen fled to the Stepstones, Bear Island, or even Skagos. Some even go as far south as the Stepstones, hoping their allegiance to Aegon will save them. This also means nothing is stopping the dead from reaching the neck. Kevin Lannister, holding Moat Cailin with a force of hardened Westermen and Crownlanders, makes a valiant stand. The swamps and marshes slow the undead advance for a time, as hundreds are lost to the bogs and swamps. It forces them into narrow corridors, where Kevin's men cut them down in waves. For a time, it seems as though the line will hold, but the dead do not tire, they do not break, and soon they are too many. Soon the bogs are so choked with the dead that they walk over the corpses, and the narrow passages widen for their armies to pass. This reaches right up to the fortress, where the Lannister garrison is swarmed and cut down. The fortress falls, and the dead pour southward. Soon the twins stand as the last great bastion against the dead. Kevin Lannister watches from the ramparts as the frozen horde gathers beyond the riverbanks. His forces, a patchwork of Westermen, Crownlanders, and what remains of the loyalist Riverlords, tighten their grips on swords, spears, and torches. Tywin Lannister, assembling what forces he can from the Westerlands, rushes to reinforce the Riverlands, intent on making the rivers and hills their last line of defense. He pulls every last loyal man into the campaign, gambling everything on stopping the dead here. If they can hold, they may yet have a chance to survive. Robert Baratheon stands ready to join the fight, his warhammer in hand as he prepares to ride out of Storm's End. But before he marches, he spots a familiar ship on the horizon. Ned Stark, exhausted and weary, waves him down from the deck. As Robert boards, he sees how bad Ned looks.
You must leave. The war is lost. Take your brothers. Take those who would follow. The future is elsewhere. You can't expect me to just take off and leave. This is my family's seat. I have bannermen who have called this place their home for thousands of years. And if you do nothing, they shall call it their tombs, if they are fortunate to have not been risen. Robert, this isn't the Trident, where you can just crash a man's chest and be done with it. This is far greater than any of us. A force neither of us can stop, even together.
Robert clenches his jaw, his warrior's pride demanding he stay, but the desperation in Ned's eyes is unshakable. With great reluctance, he gathers Stannis, Renly, and those still loyal to House Baratheon. They abandon Tywin and sail towards Dorne and the Stepstones. As the Stepstones, the Vale, and Dorne fill up with refugees, problems begin to arise with food and space. Overpopulation and the looming specter of famine leave the refugee-laden Southlands in chaos. The lands here are not fertile, even if the dead do reach them, but Aegon decides to take a desperate gamble. With so many people here and more coming from Dorne, the Stormlands, and the Vale, he has a massive army of seasoned warriors and desperate survivors. These men form a vanguard eastwards, striking hard into a place ripe for pickings, the disputed lands. Though the free cities often fight for it, none have ever successfully held it. With this army, Aegon beats aside any opposition, wiping out the sellsword companies sent against him as the survivors of Westeros settle there, just as the Targaryens had during the Doom. At the Twins, Kevin Lannister makes his final stand. The river acts as barriers, slowing the dead, forcing them into bottlenecks where fire and steel hold them back. But they are too many, and Kevin knows it. The bridge collapses, a desperate act of sabotage to buy more time. Yet the dead do not stop. They fjord the river on the backs of their own fallen, an unstoppable tide of ice and death. Tywin arrives, the remains of his legions forming a desperate battle line. But it is too late. The Night King himself rides into the fray, the chill of his presence enough to freeze steel in men's hands. Tywin fights to the bitter end, his golden lion banners soon swallowed in the abyssal cold. He does not yield. He does not relent. He faces the Night King with all the fury of his house and falls, the last true king of the Seven Kingdoms. With the collapse of the Twins, the dead pour southward, an unrelenting storm of darkness. The Seven Kingdoms are no more. The long night has come. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.